A Shalom Akim, Shalom, Shalom, giving all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh, Ba'ashem Yahushai, Ba'ashem Akakwadash. Double honors to the apostles and the elders of Great Millstone for teaching us his truth and salutations to the sincere Akim and Akwathim and listen. May the blessing of election be upon your house. My name is Raquai. I'm back in here with another quick and Lord's will is always an edifying lesson. And for today's lesson, I just wanted to do a little bit of breaking some false doctrines. So there was a video that was sent to me in regards to a doctrine which explains that the seed of Abraham, or at the time his name was Abram, our forefather, essentially his seed would be afflicted for a certain amount of time, approximately 400 years. And there's a doctrine that has been rolling around in equating that 400-year time period in regards to when a bulk of the Israelites were actually brought to America in 1619 what the doctrine explains that is from 1619 to 2019. So I'm gonna kind of explain it in roughly paraphrase. So they equate those years, that 400-year time period from the year 1619 to essentially 2019, right? And I wanted to just go through this and break down and essentially debunk this doctrine. Essentially, what it is, it's a false doctrine. And as the scriptures say, prove all things, right? So as a matter of fact, I won't make the lesson too long, but I kind of just wanted to bring some light and shed some clarity in regards to this this false doctrine. Because one thing I've noticed is that we're living in a time with all this AI technology and with all these different essentially knowledge being increased. There's a lot more seducing spirits. There's a lot more false doctrines that are rolling around in regards to whether it might be the scriptures. Sometimes certain scriptures are used, but they're not interpreted properly. They're not actually given the clear understanding of what actually is being discussed, right? So this is First Thessalonians chapter 5 verse 21, and it says this, it says, prove all things and hold fast which is good, right? So what I want to do real quick, through the spirit and power of Yahweh Bashim Shai, is to be able just to properly dissect this false doctrine and then actually give some more clarity, and hopefully you brothers and sisters are actually properly edified, right? So where did this doctrine come from? So it's I don't know if there's a name for it. I just call it the 400-year doctrine, right? So let me go to the precept, because there's a lot of these AI videos floating around here and there, causing essentially confusion, right? So let me go to it. So this is Genesis chapter 15 verse 13, and it says here, and he said unto Abram, know of a surety of thy seed shall be a stranger in the land that is not theirs, right? So essentially Abram, who's later on his name would be changed to Abraham, he would give birth to a few sons. So he had Ishmael, he had Isaac, and then he had the sons that were born from his other wife, Keturah, right? Just to give understanding. But we only know that we're dealing with a specific group of lineage and people here, right? So so further on, continuing on, it says here, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years, right? So that particular seed essentially will go into a place, into a land, right, which was not theirs, and they will be afflicted for approximately 400 years. So what seed was that? Right? That seed was the Israelites, right? And that, I want to get that in a second. But I wanted to read more here just to kind of bring some clarity and actually destroy this false doctrine that's been floating around in regards to the this particular time period. Because what Jake will do, they would equate what the bulk of the slaves that arrived in America during that time, the 1600s, and they equated up until the time of 2019. So 1619 to 2019, just for clarity, right? And this is verse 14, and it says here, and also that nation whom they shall serve, I will judge, and afterward shall come, shall they come out with great substance. So keep that in mind. So the Lord would judge this particular nation. We will serve them, and also they will come out with great substance. So my question is, okay, when did that, if that is the case of what happened between 1619 to 2019, when was your great substance awarded to you Israelites? You so-called Negroes, Latinos, and Native Americans, as well as you speckled-bird Israelites who do not look like typical Israelites. When was this great substance awarded to you, right? When did you, when was this judgment from the Lord passed on to this particular nation, right? When did this all happen, right? So this is the question, that our people don't actually take the time to properly dissect and understand. Right, so let me go and get this in Sirach, and then I want to prove this. Let's see here, because our people hear, essentially they might hear smooth words, they might hear tongues, not tongues, I'm sorry, they will hear certain claims being made without actually examining it. And it says here, this is Sirach chapter 11 verse 7, and it says, blame not before thou hast examined the truth, understand first and then rebuke. Right? So our people don't actually take the proper time to properly try and understand what is actually being said to them, right? And the Lord reveals his secrets unto his servants, the prophets. And where do you find the prophets? In the chief places of concourse, right? So let's get more understanding in regards to this particular judgment, what happened, and this great substance. When did this all happen, right? So I'm going to go to in the time of Exodus. So this is during the time when the Lord was plaguing the Egyptians. So what would happen? We would serve these. So essentially, we serve them in hardcore captivity and hardcore slavery, right? Let me see if I get something. Hold on. Just to actually prove each of those points. Right, and it says here, this, I want to read this in Exodus, and I want to get the great substance in a second. So this is Exodus chapter 5 verse 1, and the title here, it says Israel's labor increased. Right, so eventually you had a Pharaoh that did not know about the works and did not know about Joseph, and essentially we were essentially being put into rigorous hardcore captivity and hardcore slavery. Right, so here it says afterward it says, and Moses and Aaron went in and told Pharaoh, thus saith the Lord Yahweh, power of Israel, let my people go, and they may hold a feast unto me in the wilderness. And the Pharaoh said, who is the Lord that I shall obey his voice and let Israel go? I know not the Lord, neither will I let people go. And they said, the God of the Hebrews hath met with us. Let us go, we pray thee, 3 days' journey in the desert, and sacrifice unto our power, and lest he fall us with pestilence, with the sword. Right, so essentially we were in a time where, okay, let me jump down here. I want to jump down to verse 5, and I want to read this here. So just to show you the idea of this hardcore servitude that we were facing in this time, right? And it says here, and Pharaoh said, behold, the people of the land are now many, and ye make them rest from their burdens, right? So we were multiplying, right? But at the same time, and that's another thing also, we were in captivity, but these other nations, they're very fearful of when Jake essentially multiplies, right? Showing you that we would be as the sand of the sea and the stars of heaven, right? We would be that essentially a nation and a company of great nations pursuant to Genesis, that will come out of the loins of Jacob, right? And what happens to Jacob's name? It was changed to Israel, right? So just to bring more understanding in regards to this false doctrine that's being constantly discussed here, and it says, and the Pharaoh commanded the same day the taskmasters of the people and the officers, saying, ye shall no more give the people straw to make brick, as heretofore let them go and gather straw for themselves. So essentially they were making the servitude a lot harder, right? Verse 8, and the tale of the bricks which they did make heretofore ye shall lay upon them, ye shall not diminish aught thereof, for they be idle. Therefore they cry, saying, let us go sacrifice unto our power. So that's pretty much the same sentiment that when you equate it spiritually, in a sense, the other the so-called Americans, Esau, in this captivity, that's what they do to demonize Jake. They call them lazy, and Jake is, they're known to be very, especially like so-called Mexicans, they're known to be very, very hardworking, right? And then you've had the works and the inventions of a lot of so-called blacks, right? During this time, not this time, I'm sorry, but during times before, that were actually providing proper inventions and so on and so forth in America. But I'm also saying this, I'm kind of just saying this as a side note, but this is referring to ancient Egypt here in the hardcore servitude that we faced, which was spoken about in Genesis 15, like I just read, right? And it says here, and let no more work be laid upon them, they that may labor in therein, let them not regard vain words, right? So don't regard what these points that is actually being spoken to you, right? But just continue to work, and the captivity just become rigorous and more hardcore. So let's get a point that was spoken of that great substance, right? So this is Exodus chapter 12 verse 33, and I want to read down to 35. And it says here, so here it says Exodus of Israel, and it says, and the Egyptians were urgent upon the people that they might send them out of the land in haste, for they said, we be all dead men. And the people took their dough before it was leavened, and kneading troughs, being bound up in their clothes upon their shoulders. And the children of Israel did according to the word of Moses, and they borrowed of the Egyptians jewels of silver, and jewels of gold and raiment. And the Lord gave them favor in the sight of the Egyptians, so that they lent unto them such things as were required, and they spoiled the Egyptians. So right here, as they were being exodus out of Egypt, they left with substance. This is the substance that's what's being spoken of here. At the time of 2019, there was no substance that you Israelites received. We essentially transgressed against the Lord, and the Lord brought us into another captivity, essentially where Judah and Israel be reunited together, and we would have to go to an enemy for the want of all things, right? Which I'm speaking about in America. But this great substance, as was spoken of in Genesis 15, is referring to ancient Egypt, when we were served hardcore captivity for 400 years, and then we left with great substance. So this is an example of the great substance that we had being Exodus out of ancient Egypt, right? I'll read it verse 35 in the AMP here, and it says, "And now the Israelites had acted in accordance to the word of Moses, and they had asked the Egyptians for articles of silver and articles of gold and clothing." So they had, that's showing you the examples of that substance that we had when we were Exodus out at that time, right? So this is to bring more and essentially destroy a lot of these different um, false doctrines that's rolling around, because we're living in a time where there's a lot of, as the scriptures say, gross darkness to people, right? So you start to see there's a lot of misunderstandings in regards to certain things that are spoken of in the scriptures, right? So so that pretty much covers that. Let me just get this in Timothy. Just bear with me. One second. Okay, this is Second Timothy chapter 4, verse 3, and it says here, "For the time will come when they will not endure sound doctrine, but after their own lust shall heap to themselves teachers having itching ears, and they shall turn away their ears from the truth and shall be turned unto fables," right? So this is an example of, a doctrine that's, it sounds very seductive. It sounds very, pleasing to our people's ears, but it's not true, because where is the like, you can, you can ask Jake that today, like, you're still in captivity, you're still subject to payments. Where is the resources that you've acquired from, this captivity, if that doctrine is true, right? Let's see, a second. Actually, let me get Acts, one second. Okay, this is Acts 17 and 11, and it says, "And these were more noble than those in Thessalonica, in that they received the word with all readiness of mind, and searched the scriptures daily, whether those things were so," right? So is this going to a characteristic of the Bereans, or the church of Berea, I should say, because they had the mentality of actually examining what was actually being spoken unto them, right? Rather than they're not just going to take it, they didn't take what they heard face value, but essentially they searched the scriptures to actually get that understanding, to see that those things were actually correct and so, right? But our people don't have that type of that mindset, essentially they see it as more of a laborious activity, a hard working activity, right? And the scriptures talk about how to consider the ways of the ant, how the ant is essentially very, very diligent, it's very hardworking. That's the type of mentality, that, a very, very small creature has, right? And our people don't have those characteristics of those kinds of animals, right? Essentially they're lost sheep that have forgotten their resting place. So, I just thought I would discuss this false doctrine real quick, and kind of break it down and actually give more clarity as to what was being spoken of, right? Because, as AI technology, continues to increase, as it becomes more, as there's more improvements, there's a lot of seducing spirits that's going to actually be able to, might catch you, and might, it doesn't even sound like, you might listen to it and this doesn't sound right, so just to bring more clarity and more understanding, right? Because even the AI tools themselves, like, sometimes you might use them, but a lot of the times you have to filter. You just have to filter it through the scriptures, right? So, anyways, I'll leave the lesson there, but Lord's will, this lesson was edifying. Just like to give all praises, glory, and honor to Yahweh Bashem Yahushai. Until next time, I say Shalom.